So I guess just a heads up, I'm probably going to bounce at like 8:30 because I got to eat
That's
some
fine.
dinner. And then,
Wednesdays are my boo days.
yeah,
So
yeah, I feel
he
that.
was like, "This is a valuable conversation, so go have it, but not too long." All right.
What, he's just sitting there and just like some king's throne, like, this is a
He's like, "I'm
valuable.
waiting. I am waiting for them."
Yeah. So yeah, so I've been seeing that you've been on this little bit of a side quest on Twitter for the past 72 hours. So just for context for people who are watching on my end, and kind of where my timeline on this, because people are kind of going at me for things I didn't know existed.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
we had the
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
on Hippy Dippy on Friday.
Yeah.
Then weekend happened, me doing marching band shit. And then I saw that you were streaming, what was it, yesterday or day before yesterday?
Hmm.
And that's when I was like, oh, Gothix is streaming. Probably has to do with the video. I got baited into your clickbait title. I'm like, all right, what's going on here? And then I was like, okay, this is like a pretty average, ordinary, like just a run in the middle of your content. It's like, okay, this is the thing. I didn't know that after I was in chat that Hunter was not only watching your stream but came on your stream.
Mm.
And the
Yeah.
funny thing about it is, I thought I was dreaming it.
I
Like,
mean, me too. After that, I said, "Wow!" So I did that.
well, like the reason why I say that is because I took a nap in between, and then I remember like, shit, I forgot to turn off my laptop, and then like I was like half asleep, half awake, and then like halfway through the day, it's like I thought I saw that, but then I saw that like you two were having a back and forth or something. I don't know if it was on Twitter
Yeah.
or otherwise, and then, well, not really Twitter otherwise. It was when I responded to your tweet about victimhood and saviorship. And then people were like talking like, this is just a follow-up of the Hunter conversation. And I'm like, wait, do people not know that I was in
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
conversation?
Well, people like to make something out of nothing.
Sure.
It's yeah, it was weird, but yeah, I was not expecting to have a conversation with him honestly because like I said, I am not a fan of this debate thing. This is not I
Sure.
don't know how the hell you survive in this environment. I honestly don't. I'm just used to sitting here on my ass playing with Snapchat filters like that as my legacy as a Twitch creator.
Yeah.
And the big thing that keeps me from even considering to do debates is the aftermath, is how people treat it, where it's not uh and this is something that I learned as a YouTuber, where people say there is no such thing as a debate because a debate is not an actual debate anymore. It's just who can pwn the other person the most, who can get the
Sure.
most clickbait. And I think that is just in bad faith anyway, because now you're just destroying civil discourse. Like, why would I want to engage in another interaction with you if you're just gonna misrepresent me intentionally on TikTok and things like that? So I had no intention of speaking to him, but I think that there is value in having these discussions. So despite my best judgment, I said, let's have you come on my channel. Let's see if we can have a conversation to see if we can find a middle ground and learn something. And I thought it was going to go okay, but then again, 24 hours later, I go on his channel and I got clickbait like Hunter destroys Gothix. Is that all you care about, is destroying, or are we trying to come to it as like an agreement?
Yeah. You're talking about the hippy dippy conversation. Are we talking about the one that we had like the one-on-one? Or is it just kind of
The one,
both?
it's both,
Good.
both.
Yeah.
Because the hippy dippy conversation, he was like, all right, let's get some clips here, let's do. And first of all, making clips out of debate for TikTok is going to be nonsense anyway, because you're going to be you can't put the whole debate, you're not going to
Sure.
hear what was around the conversation. So it was that. And after he had messaged, as you saw in the group chat, I was
Oh,
sure to
we could talk about the group
yeah,
chat.
yeah.
So
Well, we can talk if you want to talk about, go right
yeah.
ahead. Go right ahead.
So usually, for people who I don't want to say you kind of, I don't want to say you don't know this, but just kind of like as a heads up,
Mm,
usually how those like the aftermath of those things work is just that people say like, oh cool, thanks for coming through, yada yada. People say their thank yous. Sometimes there's like follow-ups of information or text, people put it in there, but usually people just leave.
mm.
I am bad at not leaving those because I always forget how the X works, like X to leave it, but whatever. So I reached out to you about like, oh, like maybe, or like paraphrasing it because I think I left the chat at that point, but like I was trying to like, okay, like maybe we could have like a more longer flesh conversation because I think although, and I'm sure you probably may feel this way too, I felt that sometimes when we were kind of articulating ideas, there's only so much that we can do in that 1 hour slot that we had for that.
Right.
For example, like, even I admit like there was some stuff that I wanted to push back on you with, but I was like, shit, there is not enough time to properly approach this without it just like leaking over into halfway stuff.
Yeah, right.
So I was just tabling a lot of things to power through. But then I was like, oh, like maybe we could like get this same group, like Counterpoints, Hunter, you and myself, and like maybe we can have this like in a different venue, whether it be Connor Space or Hunter's, whatever, or yours, what have you. And then I saw the initial exchange, like if you and Hunter talking, and then I saw that like you just popped off on him about his TikTok. And then I remember Danimo commented, and even I was like, I was in school on my laptop and like I saw like the bubbles come up, like, oh shit. Like,
World star.
yeah. Well, the thing is, which I find interesting, and again, like this is just a semantical thing for me, where I don't agree with directly God, my community's going to drag me on this because I've done this before. But I now understand the danger of when you try to initiate a conversation with someone and then shit on them in Twitter at the same time, or shit on them in TikTok at the same time. Where I would expect that, for instance, like let's say I message, like let's say the conversation that you and I like a year, Jesus, it's been really a year ago, didn't exist, and the only interaction we had was on that panel. And then I said like, hey, like if you want to reach out and like, let's have a furthering conversation about this thing. And then you just didn't say anything and let's say like it was just like a straight ghost for like, we'll say a week or something like that. Then I expect someone saying like, oh, I reached out to Gothix for a conversation, but they just left me on red. So now I'm going to have to pause these. Like I expect that in that sort of thing. But I didn't think it was going to be like a 24-hour, like less than 24-hour back and forth. Not back and forth, but like a response video or piece of content.
Yeah.
And that's again, like that's just, I don't agree with that, but that's how Hunter wants to run things, so it's fine. But yeah, I was just like, oh shit, this is about to go down. But I
try my best to make this as clear as possible. I have no desire for drama.
Sure.
I will defend myself because I have to do that, but I have no desire for it. I don't go looking for it. The only reason I knew he made that TikTok video is because I had people tagging me in it, like saying, and what they were saying is true. Why are you, not you, but why is he, shitting on her instead of encouraging her to engage in debate? Why is this a thing where it's like we need to destroy the opposition? Because first of all, I think that's narcissistic because you're going into it assuming that you're right. Sure. I am willing to have my mind changed on things, but I'm not going to sit here and do back and forth and debating semantics about Mr. Potato Head, which is completely irrelevant to the focal point of the discussion.
Yeah, I get that for sure. Something too on that, I guess to kind of bring up the Twitter. So I don't even want to call it Twitter beef. It wasn't Twitter beef. I don't really interpret like the back and forth.
Today?
Yeah, that you and I had as Twitter, or like the other day as Twitter beef.
I wouldn't even call it Twitter beef. I honestly like. And first of all, I want to say this, put it on record. I appreciate, you do not understand how much I appreciate you reaching out and wanting to get on stream and talk to me. That should be the standard. That should be the norm, not this, let's have clickbait, let's go back and forth, who's going to pwn who, because that is literally, I think, why we have such a polarized society right now where we can't even have a disagreement about something without it thinking like, this person doesn't want me to exist or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can disagree with someone and say you're wrong, but hey, more power to you. That's it.
Yeah, or even something along the lines of, how do I say this? I'm sure you caught the vibe halfway through when we're on Dylan's, is that there is a level of just like performance in what we do, but something that really bothers me, because you ran into the same critique that I did in Dylan's content, is that I know how you talk. I know your delivery. I know how you talk on the internet because I've watched enough videos and seen enough of your content. Okay, this is just how this individual speaks. And
Mm.
sometimes what happens is when people see someone for the first time, they assume things like bad faith, condescension, and other things just based on the delivery of the language. And that's something that I don't know how we can move forward in like just understanding that. Where, like people were saying things like, even in like the comments of Dylan and stuff like that, like, "Oh, she's so condescending. Like, can't you hear the condescension
It's
in her
my
voice?"
voice.
Yeah, true. That
I'm
was
from
like,
Rhode Island. What do you want?
and then like I'm sitting there like reading, it's like, oh, I see this now because this is what people say about me. and and again, like I'm 32. It's just like there hits a point where it's just this is just how motherfuckers talk. This isn't like this deep. Granted, to be fair, there are people who are in right wing spaces, I'll use it kind of like in shock quotes, libertarian spaces, non Democrat spaces, who do use that level of performance in their voice. A good example that I can think of is like, God, I just forgot his name. His face looks like it doesn't belong in his head. Charlie Kirk. Like there's a level of performance, and it sounds fucked up, but there's a level of performance in what he says, and you can hear it in how he talks. But it's kind of like hard to catch if unless you're really paying attention to it. But that aside, like I just know like this is how you talk. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think what happens is people hear how other people speak and then automatically interpret bad faith. And sometimes that could be also coupled with like language. I saw that too. The language that you disagree on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me see if I can fix it really
Yeah,
quick.
for
Hold
sure.
on. Hello. Turn off. Yeah, there we go. Okay, boom.
Yeah.
Gucci. Hold on 1 second. Let me
Yeah.
fix. Oh, I completely agree with you. Okay, cool. Awesome. I was gonna video. I should have done this earlier. High quality. Okay, cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I guess like our interaction.
Mhm.
But I don't even think it's necessarily interaction. I just think that because I have a lot of experience on this, because
Okay.
I'm a reformed Twitter addict.
Okay. Good.
Is
Good. It's good to get away from that.
well, yeah, like I usually see people tweet things and I understand like, okay, there is a level of performance in Twitter.
Hmm.
There is a level of driving interaction. So sometimes people just say things to say things. Like look no further than like John Lindsay, Chris Rufo, Dave Rubin. Like they literally put things to entice a reaction. So sometimes I'm always curious about what is sort of the underlining point that people are trying to make.
Hmm.
So within the thing that you tweeted, um,
Oh, my point.
yeah, well,
All
basically,
right.
like you said, I'll just read it out
Yeah.
loud. When black people obsess over white supremacy, it's a subtle way of admitting their inferiority. When a white person obsesses over it, you're left with a white savior complex. There's no better example of low expectations than believing black people need you, or vice versa. I guess the question I have is, which might be different than what people might expect of me as a member of the left delegation, is where does that thought come from for you? Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like,
Yeah. So I guess let me start off by saying that I believe this fascination with white supremacy is blown way out of proportion.
sure,
I find it a little ridiculous to for people to suggest that we in the current generation in 2021 have it worse than people living in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And uh, if people before us and people now, if I can go to my mom and say, hey, you are black, you've been able to navigate around this idea of white supremacy, then why is it that instead of the rhetoric, instead of just complaining about white supremacy, why isn't there more collaborative efforts? Like, for example, if someone believes that white supremacy is a thing and it's doing something to hinder someone's ability to just live their life, then why isn't the conversation, hey, black man, you're not afraid of white supremacy? White supremacy ain't holding you back. Show me how you did it. Show you how you got there. That's my thing. It's like it's okay to feel a certain way, but there needs to be action behind it. Otherwise, it just seems like complaining. And my main point is that if people are able to navigate around this, and this is why I'm so critical about identity politics, is because it's following one line of thought. And if for example we're talking about white supremacy, and this section of black people are able to navigate around that and live normal successful lives, then then there lies where something is always going to be weaponized by politics, where a politician is going to come in and say, you have a white supremacy problem, I can help you with that, let me fix that for you. That's where I'm at. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of politicians on megaphones these days talking about white supremacy as if
Sure.
everyone's going to die all of a sudden.
Yeah, I can give that yield. I guess the concern that I have is that I think one level, and we've talked about this before, but I think it's very important to properly identify what we're navigating around. And then once we kind of understand what we're navigating around, then asking the question of, okay, how do we approach attacking this enemy? Because while I believe that white supremacy is an enemy of society, I do think that there is a vein of individuals who don't have the same level of stake in that observation of this like structure that we're dealing with. To give you an example, if somebody is, for instance, I like, as I mentioned, I'm clearly male, but, or mentioned like in the past conversation, but there's certain things around women's rights that there is a level of separation that I have. And for example, abortion. So something that I got to remember is that, okay, there's a way that I can approach helping individuals and navigating within politic that's going to be different than somebody who is femme, or a woman, I should say, in navigating abortion. And one of my concerns is that there are people who are able to identify what the problem is and say, like, this is the problem, it's got to be stopped. And then you hit this wall of like, okay, well, what's the next like approach to that? And then it's like, it kind of like the conversation falls apart or it doesn't really hit that next level. And I feel like that's where maybe your concern lies. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like your concern is that you want to see not only mobilization towards a problem, but also action towards that problem. And when I say mobilization, I mean like the spark of like getting excited about something. And then you want to see like action that leads to like turning that spark into a fire.
Right. And that's, I will say you partially agree with that. Like, I agree with what you said, where I want action to follow, but there also has to be, I think, an agreement of what it is that we're dealing with. If white supremacy is what we're dealing with, that conversation gets completely diluted, I'm sorry, by people that are white. And when we're talking about racial issues, I'm sure you saw the interactions I had on Twitter today with a lot of white people telling me, the black woman, that I am wrong. And
Sure.
it's that it's the problem with is now we're dealing with, instead of my lived experiences and knowing what I know about the hood and the culture and why my cousin got incarcerated, even though he grew up in a pretty nice home with both parents at home, right? Why did he commit the crimes? That personal experience is now getting pushed to the wayside by means of people flaunting a diploma. I got this from a university, therefore I am right, and your experience as a black person is null and void. That's what I have been fighting against for the past year and a half.
Gotcha. I see. Well, I think there's something a little bit to that, right? Where I, because of how we kind of get socialized in America, we
Hmm.
can advocate for things and even be a part of things that are against our best interests. This is kind of where I'm going to use the term righty very sort of broadly speaking. When I'm talking about righties, I'm talking about like basically like the Facebook righty, like the generic person that people think is like on the right on Facebook. Because I don't know if anybody knows, like those individuals are on another level when it comes to like online interaction.
No, Facebook?
Yeah, Facebook righties are fun. They're AKA a lot of the communities I navigate around. Where like people will say something where it's like, well, you're against capitalism, but you own an iPhone. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay. Like you can still like there's a level of participation in the game of society that we have to play because we still have to navigate in society, right? You can like, as much as I want to be as health conscious as possible, especially around things like meat consumption. At the end of the day, if I go to the Chinese market that's right next to my house and meat is cheaper per pound than the vegetables, I'm gonna go with the cheaper option. like funds are tight. Funds are tight in this castle. While at the same time, I think that sometimes it is possible due to our socialization that we can uphold things that do go against our best interests. So like there was something, a little bit of buzz when people were calling Larry Elder or a white supremacist, or like a white supremacist in black. It was like a lot of crazy things they were saying about him. But what sucks about that is I think there is a level of truth in the idea that you can be an individual of identifiable group and still uphold potential things that are against your best interest. With Larry, it's very like particular things, because there are like, and again, I want to make this turn to like the Larry Elder back and forth defense on his points with like little research on both of our ends, but there are like situations I think where it's possible for sure that you could be a member of identifiable group. Like I think it's possible for you to be black and racist. I think it's possible for you to be trans and transphobic. I think it's possible for you to be gay and gay phobic. But I think that comes somewhere in wanting to uphold certain things that make you comfortable in society.
Well, I think that, well, yeah, I do agree with you that you can be black and you can be racist. I'm glad we clear that up. But I think that, just specifically what you said there about, trans, you can be trans and be transphobic. That's, I think, where the conversation kind of derailed a little bit in the debate that we had where we were getting on the trans issue, and you guys kind of like, I don't want to get canceled, so I didn't push it anymore. Do you want to? I kind of want to know how you think. That's one of my main reasons for coming on here. I want to know how you think in correlation to identity politics and how it manifests in society right now.
Sure.
So when you, for example, a trans person can be transphobic. My question is, who is determining what is transphobic, in the same sense that who is determining the hate speech? Personally, for me, I say that hate speech doesn't exist. I call it a myth because at the end of the day, the consequence of that hate speech, and we're not talking about threats, but the consequence of saying you're the N-word, you're this, you're that, is hurt feelings. Because then you'd have to compare whose mental hurtness is more impactful than the other, and that's just a weird game. Like I don't want to debate that with somebody.
Yeah, well, I mean, not to debate it here, but I do think it is possible where we can have something that is overtly hateful that can lead to harm to others, right? As an example, like I think there should be some acknowledgement when somebody commits an act of violence and uses a racial epithet when navigating around it. This is why. What's that?
What is that racial epithet?
Yeah, so like a slur, some type of a slur or slur adjacent. Like I think there's a much more deeper level. To use the meme that I use, like there's a difference between grabbing somebody by their neck and beating them across the face in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4, and then versus somebody grabbing somebody by the neck in Call of Duty, beating them across the face, and then calling them the N-word. Like I think those two things need to be sort of, they are acts of violence, but one I think invokes something much deeper in terms of dehumanization. But again, like I don't know, like what are your thoughts on that idea?
Okay. So I agree to an extent in the context of, for example, the Holocaust, where there was a general consensus about one particular group of people. That is bad. That is really bad. But if we're looking at individual cases, I think, where people are not getting on megaphones, yelling and trying to encourage everyone else to adopt to their way of thinking, when it's an individual, let's say, like a hate crime. And this is, and first of all, I just have to say, I have a big issue with mainstream media because they will constantly label things as hate crimes when all they have to go on is just the identifier: black person, white cop, oh, hate crime. And it's like
Sure.
that's not helping the situation. But I do think that even in the context of individual crime, let's say someone murdered a black person and that was it, versus someone murdered a black person and you just so happen to hear the murderer say the n-word in the process. Now we have this additional identifier on it saying this is a hate crime. A crime was still committed at the end of the day.
Sure.
Someone died, right?
Yeah.
Someone broke the law. And again, I think that saying this is a hate crime, this was something that was fueled by hate, that information is irrelevant. It might be helpful to prevent it from happening in the future. Like, I'm very curious about serial killers. I want to know what causes them to commit those acts in the first place, because then we can stop it, maybe. But I think putting that identifier on it saying that this is a hate crime, that's going to enable this level of paranoia where we're seeing it right now, like the person told me on Twitter, where black people are fearing for their lives because they think white supremacists are going to go out and kill them. And I think that's very unfair and abusive to someone to make them believe that.
Yeah, I think it. Maybe. Oh God, Jesus Christ! I'm about to do a debate tactic. I'm going to give you a hypothetical.
Here we go. Here we go.
Let me give you a hypothetical. So, or I guess a question, right?
Okay.
This is gonna sound really weird. Do you think there is a threshold? Oh, God damn it. I hear my brain saying this. It's
Let's
yelling
do
at me.
it. I promise you, I will not clip you, and I won't cancel you. You'll find this.
Yeah.
This is a safe space, Joe.
Oh God. All right. Let me see if I can carefully navigate this question, because sometimes the first delivery of the question makes no fucking sense. So, in your opinion, if you had to put a number to it, how many acts of violence that include racial slurs would be enough for you to recognize that maybe there's something more going on here? And I'm not talking like the same individual actor. Like I say, like multiple actors.
Multiple actors saying, okay, so how long would I, just to make sure I'm understanding, how many of those instances would it take where someone's using like the N-word while they're committing an act for me to say, okay,
And not within the
something's wrong?
act. Like, for instance, like, oh, let me, like, I guess, I see how I can make this a bit more clear. Like, okay, so Billy in school punches a kid and calls him the N-word. And then the next day, Timmy punches a kid across the face, calls him the N-word. And then the next day, Janice punches someone across the face, calls him the N-word. Like, how many acts of violence, and it's not just exclusively violence to other individuals, but maybe violence to property, violence to people maybe vicariously through that individual, like how many acts of violence that use racial slurs would you be like, okay, maybe there's something more going on here that we ought to observe?
If it's something, for example, if it's like, for example, the same high school and these kids are just doing the same thing day in and day out, but they're at the same high school, my thought is something is wrong with the culture of that high school, and it may be worth addressing whatever it is that's happening. Whether it's like a meeting, everyone gets together, we talk about why racism is bad, something like that. But I don't think it's critical race theory, and we can get on that if you want. but I would say in that instance, something is manifesting in that school that needs to be looked at in the same way of any other situation. Like my high school, there was a time, there was literally 1 week where there was a fight every day. And so the administration's like, what the hell's going on here? Let's figure it out. Why are these people fighting? But if it was, we're seeing it pop up on the news, I can't trust the news anyway. But when I do see these hate crimes popping up on the news all the time, I have to remind myself that these are individual cases. And I think the dangerous thing, and this is why I have a big issue with critical race theory, is because it generalizes people based on their identifiers. And now the result is we got white kids thinking, I am the reason that Tyrone got stabbed, and that doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, let's build an idea of schools, because obviously I want to say obviously you don't watch my content, but our times don't line up. Like when you're streaming, I'm streaming, and then when we're both off on like the same days. Wednesday usually is my off day. Like it's a whole thing, right? So
Hey.
I've been paying a lot of attention in how I gotta remember I moved the camera. It's no longer here. It's here. I do. I'm concerned about what was going on in Loudoun County, Virginia, because something that was funny when you brought up school districts is within Loudoun County, they did a survey of like this is a school-wide survey of students in terms of how like just interpersonal student interactions. And they found that Black students and students of color were reporting multiple instances of other students using racial slurs, using things that they would describe as racial discrimination. And what the school district ended up doing was taking a much more conscious attention on culturally responsive teaching, social emotional learning, diversity training of teachers, and all the like amalgamation of like all these other policies. And something that was interesting that popped up in that, and why I bring it up, is that I saw like particularly white parents basically, it was really strange, denying that it existed. And I'm wondering, I guess, in your opinion, if a parent were to deny that instance happening, despite the fact that the school did like a school-wide survey, and this is what they found, I guess the question I ask you is like, what would be the best representation of somebody, or in your opinion, what would be the best representation of a dissenting parent within that system? A parent who's arguing like, hey, this is conflated and it's not actually that big of a deal.
Is this recent?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the survey happened around 2018, 2019. And then the initiation of the programs and policies and procedures to sort of rectify this have been happening in the 2020s, 2021, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I would be, so in this situation, I would first say, and people aren't going to like my response to this. First of all, schools are shit right now. Am I allowed to swear? Sorry.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, schools are shit right now. And there's a lot of divisiveness being created in these schools, whether people want to believe it or not.
Sure.
It's kind of alarming how many people are homeschooling their kids or prepared to do that. And in this situation, if I were truly worried about what the narrative is in with my child and their education, I would simply homeschool them. Like I would have to take control of that situation. But that's just me. Like I'm not like I don't have kids right now, but this idea of putting them in a school where they're going to teach like anti-racism and critical race theory, hell to the no, I will homeschool them.
Would you hold the same credence to a parent who, or the same, or I guess yield the same ground to a parent who might feel that their student isn't being heard within the system? So like, let's say you are a parent with a Black student in the school, and then like your child is reporting that this is happening to them, and then the school district does nothing. Do you think that parent should have the same right to do that, to pull the kid out of that situation and put them in the homeschool, or homeschool them rather?
Yeah, hell yeah,
Gotcha.
do that. Because the way that I look at it, and I know I got some people in the comments saying that's not realistic, whatever. The way that I look at it is we have choices, and
Sure.
and I think that is what is being missed, is that we have the ability to remove ourselves from the situation, and we have to consider, we have to weigh the pros and cons of a situation, right? So it's like, for example, I just I'm going to upload a video tomorrow on hate speech. And one argument that I get about hate speech is like, well, what if you're working for a racist boss? It's like, okay, how bad do you want the money? That's my response. And people don't like it. But it's like, how bad do you want the money? Because
here's the question. Here's the question.
Hold on.
Sorry. Yeah,
hold on. Let me finish. I said, how bad do you want the money? Or are you prepared to find another job or pave your own way and seek entrepreneurship? Because you have those choices. Because the alternative is to try and change the way that someone feels. And that's possible, but it's a very delicate procedure. The way that people are trying to advocate to get rid of bigotry now is being bigoted themselves, and that ain't doing anything.
True.
So that's the way that I look at it. I'm not endorsing hate and bigotry. I'm just accepting that, yeah, you're going to meet some people in life that aren't going to like you for some superficial reason. What are you going to do about it? That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, and also it depends too, right? Where it's like, listen, if you're paying me $500 a week and all I have to do is deal with Janet, every time Janet thinks I drink her juice in the fridge and then she just calls me a dirty N-word, but I'm still making 500 a week, like we can work with that. I think I can
The
deal with
racist is
Janet.
gonna pay your mortgage. It's
I
good.
think, I think I can deal with Janet. I think I can deal with Janet. Now, however, I will acknowledge that I do think that people, like, something's got to give to an extent, right? Where, because I navigate this around this when I first started working bar and bat mitzvahs, where I ran into a lot of Jewish kids just saying crazy shit. and for and like for a while it was really strange to navigate around because I never really experienced it before. Like I never experienced Jewish kids aged 11 to about 14, 15 saying the N-word to rap songs in the same proximity as their parents. And then their parents just like, well, that's just what they do. And it's like, okay. I never experienced the idea of, I mean, this happened to me at multiple mitzvahs where I would be working on the job and people would default that I was either working as a nanny to a parent or an elder parent, which happened a lot. It's when I said a lot, it was more than 5.
Sorry for laughing.
Yeah, no. But the thing was, at first, that was my reaction too, because the thing is that like I would just be like chilling on my phone outside the venue. Because it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been to a bar and bat mitzvah. They're just loud as fuck all the time for 6 straight hours. And sometimes like when you work 2 events in a row, you just need a reset. Like the one that really like jarred out to me was the first instance. I was like standing outside the venue, just on my phone, just trying to like figure out what to do for a rehearsal later the next day. And then this old man was like, "Oh, great, thank you." And he just gave me his keys. And then like he pointed to where his car was. And I'm like, what the fuck? and then I was like, "Oh, sir, I don't work for valet. Like, sorry." And it's like, "Oh, like I know a lot of you do." And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And then the whole drive, the whole drive home, I was like explaining this story to one of our other roadies, and he like we were having a laugh about it. But so a part of me is like, God, like if I had to deal with that shit every day, like for a while it felt like that. Like every single weekend I'd run into some weird interaction like that. And thankfully, like I was still able to kind of like mentally navigate on that and kind of refocus, mainly because I realized that like that's not how do I say this? It's an outlier, but at the time it just felt like a bigger thing because it happened in such like consecutive points. And again, to be fair, like it still happens from time to time, but it's not as doesn't resonate as loud. But I do think there is like a level of sort of tolerance that people have to these things. And I do think that some people aren't, and I don't think they should be expected to have like a heightened tolerance that I have or someone else. You know what I mean? That was a long explanation, by the way.
Well, I mean, 2 things come to mind when I think of that. The first is, that's so funny.
It's pretty fucked up.
I once had really quick, I once had this toddler come up to me when I was living in Kentucky for a little while. He came up to me and I was like, "High five." And he was about to give me a high five. This is a white boy. And he was just like, "Oh, no." I said, "Why? Why don't you want to give me a high five?" He said, "I don't want to turn brown." I said, "Oh, you're cute." So, okay, but as far as that, I would say, I think what you're describing is what I would use for one of the arguments when I say that the only solution to getting rid of this idea of hate speech, for example, or feeling like hate speech is hindering our ability to live, is to learn to navigate around it, suck it up, be powerful, don't allow words to hurt you. Understand that hate speech is still speech. Because here's the thing, now we have to consider people on a wider scale. I'm sure if I go to a different country and meet someone over there, they're not going to view me in the way that I view myself. They're not going to understand Western culture. They're not going to subscribe to the same stuff. So I think that on American soil in particular, when we start getting into this idea that we need to like certain words aren't allowed or whatever, and I totally understand in the context of school, listen, there should just be no swearing in school at all. None of that. Doesn't matter what it is, just no swearing. But in the context of like an adult expecting people to always treat you in the way that you would want to treat them, or always be nice, or always not be racist, it's like you would have, in order to guarantee that, you would have to think that every culture around the world is going to subscribe to the same thing. And then you would also, and I think that that is hurting the person on the receiving end in the process, because now they're become so accustomed to having people just always be nice to them that when they encounter someone from a different culture, they're like, what is this? For example, I am very concerned about trans people. Like, I have a trans friend, a trans moderator, and the way that the rhetoric is being pushed, there's a lot of countries out there that do not recognize trans people as people. But
Yeah.
we are enabling this mindset like, no, you gotta accept me. No, you need to accept that trans women are women. And it's that type of militant, no, you need to subscribe to this, that is going to in turn bite these people in the ass. And I don't think they're realizing it. And that's my fear for any of this, regardless of, and this is why it gets so on top of identity politics, is I believe inevitably identity politics will lead to a curated cult that follows one line of thinking, and you don't have to go far but my YouTube comments to see what I'm talking about.
Sure. I
I
guess
kind of went on a tangent.
yeah,
But
no, you good, you good. I guess a question I have, because I talk about this a lot, about, I think that there's two levels that go on in society. I think
Yeah.
there's the first level is what we affirm ourselves to be, and then the next level is what society affirms us to be. As an example, to use kind of like my chat's kind of mauled because I've used this example.
Can I interrupt you before you
Sure.
go?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to address your chat because your chat's going buck wild about
Well,
what
they're
I
always
just said
going
right
buck
now.
wild.
All right, everyone's going buck wild, and there's a comment here, and I need to say this.
Sure.
This shit is why cis people need to shut the actual fuck up about trans people forever. When you say that, I need you to seriously consider how many trans people are in agreement with me. It's not to say I'm right, you're wrong. It's to point out the flaws of identity politics. When we say that something is transphobic, that means that insinuates that that whoever is transphobic is rejecting a certain line of thinking. Let me show. I'm gonna pull out the whiteboard. Hold on.
Oh, Lord Jesus Christ, what's
I'm gonna
going
pull
on?
out the damn whiteboard.
What is this
Hold on a
timeline?
second.
What is this
Here we
timeline? Is this
go.
me in 2020? All right, let's have it.
All right, here we go. All right, you're not gonna see what I'm writing right here, but let's just say trans. And over here, we're gonna have the rhetoric. Trans women are women. There are no biological differences between men and women. Trans women in female sports. Whatever, you get the gist. Pronouns,
Okay.
whatever in your bio, whatever. Okay, so here's all the rhetoric. And when it comes down, it splits. That looks really bad. It splits. So now you have some trans people saying, no, I know that I have gender dysphoria, so I'm on this side. I know that trans women don't belong in female sports, so I'm on this side. And then you have the other people that say, actually, there are infinite pronouns. I do believe that trans women belong in sports, and there are no biological differences. So inevitably, you will have a split. So the point that I'm trying to make is when people say this is transphobic, and then they go after someone that's on the other side who disagrees with that, who also happens to be trans, now the proof is in the pudding that you're not really advocating for trans people, you're advocating for a specific ideological line of thinking. And this is consistent in any community. Any community. Think of the rhetoric of Black people, right? The narrative of systemic racism, Black people are oppressed, Black Lives Matter, blah, 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 blah. And then you look at the split of the Black leftists and the Black conservatives, and look at how Black conservatives are treated. And if you were to say that I care about Black people and I want to help and amplify Black people, you would consider them regardless of where they split.
Well, this is.
Am I crazy? Am I crazy?
Yeah. I'm gonna. Okay, there's a lot to address
on.
here. So I'm gonna go back to the affirmation thing in a second.
Yeah.
But we'll go. Okay, this is gonna sound so fucked up. We're gonna
go ahead.
We're gonna go Black trans affirmation. So
All right, go for it.
So one of the things that my community gets very frustrated with me about is when I do give black conservatives a lot of ground on certain things.
Mm.
What that looks like in practice is, and just to be clear, I was for the longest time conservative. And I'm talking like very, very, very conservative. And my community knows like certain beliefs that I held because we had like a confession where we shared different ideas of old beliefs. But one of the things that I realized as I was like just moving or like just getting older is that sometimes there are examples where you might say certain things that might be
Mm-hmm.
upholding the very thing you're trying to dismantle or reform. As an example, like I always thought that black men, for instance, just the only like way to go in terms of hairstyle was just turn like the high and tight or bald, but predominantly high and tight. And I just really rejected like any type of alternative hairstyles. And what I realized in that idea is that that does create a level of restriction in terms of people's expression. Like if I'm saying that every single person, every black man should have a high and tight haircut or go bald, that's restricting. And like I mean, like obviously now I have a much more louder hairstyle, but I realize and recognize that that could potentially prevent people from maybe exploring who they are and using the things that grow on us as a way is like just giving different levels of expression. That's like an example I would give of saying that like, okay, it's possible where by me wanting a very sort of rigid A and B when it comes to expression of hair, that could potentially prevent like different types of outward growth when it comes to like wanting to explore different hairstyles. With that being said, I think that for trans folks, I'm gonna say this very broadly speaking here. I think it is also possible to elicit ideas that might potentially endanger other trans individuals. One thing that I heard Lauren Witzke posit to Blair White was because Blair White said something along the lines of like, I do not want people to to like go down the same road that I did. And Lauren Witzke just said straight up, and this is the Blair White, by the way, like, great, then you should grow out your mustache and stop, like, I forget the exact quote of it, but something like, well, you should just
Yeah.
grow your mustache and tell people like that like this is not okay, and just be who you actually are. And then I like, and this is something that Carlin and I are probably going to talk about because that entire, I don't know if you know that panel that I'm talking about, that shit front to back
I
is
think I saw it. White lady, blonde hair.
Lauren
I think I
Witzke,
saw.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
woman
probably so. Yeah.
is on another level of,
Yeah.
and the thing is, like to me, that is like holy shit. Where like this was a panel about coalition building of the right, and then like even there's like points where this woman went after Carlin and her marriage, and her status of her husband as a marriage, and then it's like at what point do we recognize that hey, like certain ideas and certain things that people might posit can potentially essentially dehumanize an individual. Again, let me make this very, very clear. Lauren Witzke is an outlier. Like this is a woman who is incredibly far right. She sides with white identitarians. I don't know if you know anything about these individuals. They talk about white positivity and
Yeah.
that anybody who isn't part of the white positivity movement is anti-white. It's incredible content until you realize
Mm.
they're serious. But
Yeah. I mean, to be
yeah.
fair, it sounds a lot like identity politics now in the context of black people. It sounds the opposite.
And what do you mean?
Like
I missed half of that because like it crapped out of my end.
it sounds like the rhetoric for black people, but in the opposite, where, this white pride idea or whatever, it's like when you center ideology around a skin color, it's bad regardless, because it's not truly celebrating diversity, it's celebrating one line of thinking, and that's not diverse.
Well, we can recognize for Black Americans for a very long time, like, like our rights were on the chopping block,
But they're not
constantly.
anymore. So why are we
Uh,
acting like
I'd
who's
argue,
whose?
yeah, go for it.
whose rights on? I want to talk to them. I want to write them a letter.
Yeah, I think that it's going to manifest itself in different ways, right? Like we are far beyond the Atwaters of the world. We're far beyond the Nixons of the world.
Mm.
But I
Yeah, yeah.
do think that there is value, and the Republican Party kind of elicited this in the 60s and 70s, that like we can't just like call people the N-word anymore. We're gonna have to like change this in such a way to make it a bit more inviting for people. And that's my concern, because what ends up happening, and again, this isn't like exclusively, even though like what I'm talking about and the idea of changing language and changing how we talk about things isn't exclusively when I'm saying the right broadly. I'm just saying more like we do this in different ways. But my concern is always when we're talking about race is that I try my best to keep a thumb on these things, because I don't want to see white identitarian movements who overtly advocate for whites being separate from society, and only or even more extreme of whites, only whites having political power, to end up in these political movements. Because I think sometimes in the desire to be as inclusive as we can to people and inclusive to ideas, is that sometimes we can let nefarious actors within our movements and coalitions to the point where it's like, shit, like, why does within the CRT discourse, and thankfully Carolyn has done she's doing the Lord's work and trying to make a distinction between white identitarians and people who are separate from critical, like dissenting opinions of critical race theory. She's trying to create that separation. But at the same time, like when I ask certain people who are dissenting into critical race theory, where what do you do when the Ku Klux Klan literally starts putting propaganda on your doorstep? And then I hear the counter argument of, well, that's not happening. And then I go like, well, this is happening in Loudoun County. And then they go like, well, this is an isolated incident. And then I go, well, this is the third time in a year that this happened. Like, when does something stop being an isolated incident? Because I don't like, these are groups that we spent such a dedicated effort in trying to like put into the shadows and ostracized from society. And now, because of something like critical race theory and dissenting opinions on that, they found that and used that to come back in. And that's why I think, in sort of a pragmatic approach, that we need to make sure that our opinions about things and what we advocate for is very clear and focused. And then those who are very clearly nefarious actors stay as nefarious actors. I think sometimes, as we saw with Donald Trump, for instance, people are very hesitant in basically calling out the behavior as it is and creating separation. And granted, I understand that Donald Trump is a former president, so you want to have the former president in your corner. But at the same time, it's like like for me, something's got to give. You know what I mean?
Hey, Joe, love
Well,
ya, buddy.
the KKK incident, I don't know which one that was in particular, but I wonder if it was the black woman that got caught doing that, because that was a recent thing. Did
Oh
you see
no,
that?
no, no! It was just the white knights of the Klan just putting
Right.
propaganda on people's doorsteps in Leesburg and Fairfax, and it was just straight up overt, like we are against this queer loving CRT, and we're like all for a white America. It was. Well, I'll send you the link after. It was just really
Okay.
crazy to me
I
because
wouldn't even go ahead.
yeah, go for it. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
no, I was like I don't I don't know how many KKK members are doing it, but anytime I see something on TV, we have to consider billions upon billions of people living in the United States and these little tiny things. And I think that's where the issue is stemming from, is we have a lot of people looking at these very, very, very few incidents and focusing on that instead of comparing us now to what we had 50 years ago. And I think that's regression. And I also think that they're looking for a utopia that doesn't exist, because we have our rights. We have the ability to get licenses. I know some people were freaking out over my ID video, but like, if I can get an ID, what the hell is stopping anybody else? If you don't know how to get an ID, ask me and I'll show you. Not
Well,
difficult.
Well, I think I didn't watch the ID video. Maybe we'll agree on
Well,
this.
some people were bringing it up in the chat, and I
Yeah.
just had to
Oh yeah,
address it. But I
yeah.
do want to address one other thing.
Sure,
Can I do
sure.
that really quick before
Yeah, yeah. We got a little bit of time. But go for
this
it.
kind of goes back to the trans thing because I see some people still fuming. So this chart that I
Oh,
showed
the
you, where
whiteboard's
we
back.
have a split, the weird lungs that I built. Okay, we have this split. Trans people that say, nope, don't need pronouns. I'm a trans woman, and if you call me a man, I'm not gonna freak out at you. If you know, I don't belong trans women in sports, whatever. So we have this split over here, and then we have the people that subscribe to it. If this isn't enough to scare people, maybe the next step will. The consequence of this, and you can see this, I did a video, there's a channel, Rightly AJ, where I contribute for like cancel culture videos, and I actually interviewed Blair White last week. And Blair White gets a lot of hate all day, every day from people who are on the opposite side of her rhetoric. And in the comment section of this video, I can't begin to tell you how many people said something to the effect of, I was starting to hate trans people. I was starting to think all trans people were crazy. And I get that a lot. And actually, I have someone that said the same thing, but for Black people as a result of Black Lives Matter. I was starting to feel like I was racist. I was starting to feel like I could not have a conversation with Black people because everyone was going to react in this belligerent way. So this is what I'm saying is that when we look at these little groups and we say this is a trans thing without considering the ideas and beliefs of all trans people, not just people on the left or people that subscribe or agree with the rhetoric, but everyone, even the one that oppose it, inevitably what you're going to get is backlash from the rest of the public, because now you're sending two messages. You're sending one where it says, I can have a conversation with Gothix on Black Lives Matter and she's not going to yell at me. Meanwhile, I have a conversation with another Black person. They're going to call me a white supremacist and a Nazi. So
Yeah.
how do you fix that?
Well, there's something to that, right? Where we as people and even members of identifiable groups aren't monolithic, right? Like I got into like as an example, I have a lot of arguments with Black liberals on almost everything. While at the same time, I do think that I am a bit easier of an individual for Black conservatives to speak to. But at the same time, I'm also been called a colonizer with Black leftists and Marxists and MLs. But I think that there's something to that, right? Where like in the quest to, I'm going to use the word liberation kind of broadly here, in the quest of liberating all people, like everybody's included in that. Like even though like I'm very pro-Black in how I navigate, like I still think people like Larry Elder and Candace Owens are deserving of rights. Like one of the individuals that I looked up to that really helped influence my politics and really got me interested in politics and even wanting to serve in the military, even though that was like a pipe dream from now, was Colin Powell. And then it's funny because when I was one of the few people within my Facebook of like, yeah, this is like a serious loss for Black Americans and the loss of Colin Powell. Everybody, like all my Black liberal friends, like, what are you talking about? He's a fucking war criminal. And it's like, look, we got to remember that Colin, and again, like I don't know what like where you are age wise, but like I'm an '07 graduate of high school.
I'm 33.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. Where it's like, yeah, so we're around that same time of like, what the fuck are guidance counselors? Like, you don't go to a fucking guidance counselor for shit. Fucking, oh, someone fucking just called you something stupid, whatever. Just throw them in the locker next day. But I remember like all these people like saying like, well, look what he did like to 9/11. It's like, I didn't know about the consequences of 9/11 until I got way older. At the time, I justified like Colin Powell's argument, and I was in like 6th grade at the time. With that being said, I do think my point is that like we're not monolithic. Like members of identifiable groups aren't monolithic. I do understand the idea that it's difficult when we're navigating in that pool, like navigating the idea that we aren't monolithic. And when we have different conversations, it might feel like sometimes like one side is just pegging down our throat. But I would argue that if we look hard enough and interact with enough people, it's going to be, we'll have people who support us, we'll have people who are against us outright. And I think which is why like I even invite people to have like conversations with me about this kind of stuff, because I think that even though like we don't, even if we can't I would say this, disagreement and agreement is inevitable. Like there are going to be things that we agree on, are things we disagree on. But I do think like broadly speaking is that I am more concerned about like how do we come together on particular things and work towards a common goal to something. So for example, like if both of our, I guess if we were trying to coalition build right now and we're trying to be, I would say, I'm gonna use like this idea kind of broadly just for like a thought tank, where if we're trying to let Black Americans know their abilities to vote, like for example, like this is how you get an ID, this is how you go about getting a driver's license. Like if you can't like drive, we'll figure out like another way to bring you to these resources. I think sometimes what ends up happening is that we get so caught up in the disagreements about something. It's like, okay, what's the common goal here? Like we want people to have identification because identification allows us to vote. If that's the goal, then let's hyper focus on that goal and then like forget about all the realistic bullshit and like and arguing with people about their footnotes on Marxist Leninism and Mao and like get to the final point. Okay, if this is the goal, let's focus on the goal. I don't know if that made sense, but
no, it makes sense, and I agree that we should be focusing on the goal, but that also includes conversation, and we can't have conversation when I got people telling me in here that my opinions of my trans friends don't matter. I thought trans lives matter. What the heck happened, Joe?
Well, we gotta again, like we gotta remember that in our quest to get like for our ideas to be represented properly, this is why I encourage conversations in that it's like, and even within the Twitter interaction, like it can sometimes be really messy. And then what's funny is that you can acknowledge, like, because one person who really was on my case about this, where I was like, yo, having these type of like political and philosophical conversations on Twitter are messy and will take forever. So like, let's voice up and just have a conversation. It's like, oh, well, you just want to voice up because you're not ready to challenge us. It's like, well, wait, hang on. Like, I don't have time to navigate the character limit and subtweets and all the other shit that I'm doing.
I don't do that either.
Yeah. And again, like, and maybe like, and maybe we could be the start of this, right? Maybe we could be the start of this idea of like, okay, if something's really wild and a little weird, like maybe we could sit down and have a chat about it, as opposed to, and I think you and I are pretty good at this, like instead of like the tweet longers of like espousing ideas, especially with leftists. I love leftists. Okay. I have no problems with leftists, but sometimes like you'll talk about like, well, what does being on the left actually mean? And then it's this like 500-page document and like 400 required readings. And then it's like, I'm just trying to ask a question. Or, and again, like I'm saying like, that's like a little bit of a oversimplification. But.
Yeah. And again, like I would love nothing more, honestly, between you and me and your 145 viewers. I was fully prepared to plan something for my channel, and I think I'm gonna still do this, where I invite opposition to come on and have just a conversation in the same way that we're having a conversation right now. We're not gonna say debate. We're gonna say, you come on and let's talk. We tried it with Hunter. It didn't quite go the way that I had planned, but that is the end goal, because I also don't like going on Twitter and having these back and forths. However, occasionally I'll do it because I want to send two messages. One, I get to say whatever the hell that I want, and you're not going to cancel me off of any place. I need to desensitize the public from thinking that they have the authority to boot someone off the internet. No. And that also, I realize that a lot of people, this is how they communicate. This is how they get their internet street cred, is they just go after one another. So yeah, let's play the game, and you can help me promote my message at the same time. They never learn. That's okay. But I understand, I know completely. You probably think I'm crazy when I say that critical race theory, cancel culture, identity politics is all rooted in Marxism. Like, I saw y'all faces. You thought I was nuts.
Well, I think like
Okay.
again, like I really want to like if we I wish we had more time because I
We
really
can
want to
try
pick
it
your
again.
brains.
I don't mind coming back on.
Yeah,
You have been super
I?
nice to me.
Yeah, can I make a request? Like, can we? I don't want.
Go ahead.
It's gonna sound so fucking weird. Can we make this like not a semi-regular thing, but like a more like regular procedure, if that makes sense? I don't know. How do I say this? I think we're friends on Discord, but that's a kind of
I added you on there. Just let me know, like, probably a few days in advance would be better. Like, I'm so inconsistent with my schedule, it depends. But like, I'd be happy to come on here and chop it up with you again.
And also, you're moving up places. Yeah, I see you. I see you in those. I see you in those spaces with some people. It's like, oh shit.
Let me tell you. Let me just tell you this. Let me tell you this before, because I know you got to get ready for Carlin.
Yeah.
Good luck. She's spicy.
She's a very spicy one.
I love her though. Two things. Number one, contrary to belief, I play on the term that I'm a grifter. And truth be told, I don't give a fuck about the money. I don't care. I just want people to be okay. I want people to stop fighting. I want to stop talking about politics all day, every day. I want to get us out of this hole and move on with our lives. And the reason that I am doing this, the reason that I'm going on all these shows and meeting all these people, while it's really nice and it's a great experience, the only reason I'm doing this is because I see my country falling and nobody is believing me.
Yeah.
So that is where my frustration comes from. So I ask you, and I ask anyone else in here, especially because the people that were going crazy with my whiteboard and the trans issue, is don't.
No, it's the cut you over very quickly. The reason why the whiteboard was also funny is because I used to use a whiteboard. It's on like this side of me, so it also pop it up. That's why I was like, oh shit, like am I looking in a mirror right now?
See,
is this my eventual
you should have
truth?
just led with that. I could have told you why you keep getting shit on by black leftists. I could have told you.
No, like I shit you not. Like let me see if I can move this. Like I have a whiteboard over here that I used to like call back to on talking about like concepts and stuff like that. And people hated it. It was like, Joe, this is fucking stupid. I can't even see what you're writing. And it's like, true, these markers suck. Anyway.
But anyway, the point that I was trying to make, that's funny, is that I think the focus is too much on the semantics. We know that the reality is we know that any group of people is not a monolith. We know this, that there's going to be diversity of thought within that group. And the consequences is what we should be considering. What are the consequences of ignoring one line of thought within a specific identity group? Because, for example, if the line of thought within the trans community that is acceptable is you are going to use my pronouns, otherwise I'm going to label you in some way, you're a bigot, you're transphobic, whatever, so you're going to use my pronouns. The consequence of that is resulting in people saying, no, I refuse to compel my speech for a complete stranger, or no, I believe in my heart that there are men and women and I don't subscribe to this switching, but I'll still treat you as a human being. That is the result, is you have people that are concerned with their own liberties, because that's not liberties. First of all, that pronoun thing, like that's not liberty, expecting someone else to change their speech for you. This idea that is a form of respect. Okay, well, I don't know you, and I don't expect people to respect me if I'm expecting them to alter the way that they talk just for me. I'm not special. And this is the other thing. The final thing that I want to say is that I do not look at myself higher than anyone else. I do not think I'm special. I do not think that I am whatever. I am just like you. And if I can overcome this idea of harmful rhetoric, I promise you, you can as well. Because otherwise, we're just gonna keep going where we are right now. And I don't know about you, this doesn't feel fun. Everyone's fighting, everyone's crazy. This isn't productive. So consider the consequences of not listening to diverse ideas, regardless if you agree with them or not. That's all.
Yeah, and then maybe you and I can put in our applications to Rise and take their jobs. So,
yes, absolutely, it's fine.
I mean, I don't know if you're aware of the Rise, but it'd be some content.
Wait, the Rise of what?
No,
what Rise?
it's who runs that? The Hill does. I think The Hill does. It's a news syndicate. Even though I don't talking about too. It's a show online where they have like a lefty host and a righty host. but I'm pretty sure they're going to end up in a divorce soon, so they're going to end up getting fired. So we just got to just submit those applications in.
That's all you got to do. That's all you got to
Rising
do.
is what I'm thinking of. Rising, excuse me.
And I lied. There's one more thing I want to say, and then I promise I'll shut up because I want more grapes.
Okay.
We are in the midst of a culture war, whether or not you want to believe it. And
Sure.
the people right now that are spewing this identitarian, well, I don't even know if that's the correct term, just like, you know, this is a trans thing, this is a black thing, this is a gay thing, without considering the voices within that group. That focus on identity is not going to be around for very much longer. There is going to be a flip. I'm seeing it. It is going to, if you're a content creator and you're making content about this stuff, now's the time to start listening, because people are not going to forget. And it's, again, similar to the Cultural Revolution, where you had the Red Guards that did some terrible things to their neighbors, to their families, to their loved ones. And I'm sure a lot of those Red Guards, years down the line, when they realize what they helped facilitate, they probably regretted it. So just keep that in mind. Joe, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Again, like, doors always open. If you see a banger tweet, even though I'm a reformed Twitter addict, but if you see a banger tweet, feel free to hey, like, we can expand on this for, yeah. And yeah, no, this is pretty chill. Yeah. Obviously, use this however you want. I'll find a way. I don't know if you're recording on your end, but I'll see if I can send this over to you if you want to use it however you'd like. So.
Yeah, I got like everything past the first 10 minutes I was able to get. So the opening isn't there, but I got it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, good luck. Thank you so much for having a nice civil conversation. I'm sure everyone in chat is gonna be nice. Yeah.
My chat is an incredibly antagonistic group. They've been fighting to seize the means of the stream for a long time. This is why I can't go to the bathroom, because they start revolting every time I leave. It's like, this is the time.
Yeah, don't do that. All right, I'm out. Have a good one, bud.
All right, too. Good seeing you. Talk to you soon. Oh no, my DMs. Oops. Close call there. Close call. Oh no. I can't find the, oh no. Where's the cogwheel? Activate. Hell yeah. Hey. It's time for space music. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for what I wanted to do today. We got about 15 minutes. We are going to listen to local radio right-wing cope, okay? Joe, what are you talking about for right-wing cope? I don't know if you've watched the news today, but I'm just trying to say, I'm just trying to